In the midst of a divorce hearing, a pregnant woman is publicly humiliated by her ex-husband's new partner. But when the judge reveals hidden evidence of manipulation and cruelty, the truth shifts the entire outcome. From that courtroom emerges not just a legal decision, but the strength of a mother who refuses to be silenced. Morning arrived with a cloudy sky over Brighton. The Lafayette Courthouse building, in the heart of the regional capital, was already bustling early on. People ascended and descended the marble stairs, lawyers carried voluminous folders, and staff moved through the corridors with stacks of case files. On the third floor, the family court awaited yet another divorce hearing. Another story of separation, another announced end to a relationship that once promised to be eternal. Marina Miller arrived at the courthouse at 8:30 in the morning. Her steps were slow, careful. 6 months pregnant, each movement demanded more effort than she was used to. She wore a light blue blouse and lightweight fabric trousers, unadorned with no heavy makeup. Just a discreet lipstick, and her brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her hands rested instinctively on her rounded belly, as if protecting not only the baby but also herself from what was to come. She entered the courtroom accompanied by her lawyer, Ms. Clara Davies, a middle-aged woman with a serious expression and watchful eyes. Clara knew this type of case well. She had seen so many women in the same position, facing not only the dissolution of a marriage but also public humiliation and emotional abandonment. Marina was another, but Clara knew that each story carried its own pain, its own struggle. Marina chose a bench in the front rows, near the table where the lawyers would sit. The room was still empty, but it would soon begin to fill. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. There, in that cold and formal space, her future and that of the child she was expecting would be decided. There it would be determined whether she would find peace or continue to be a target of attacks and manipulations. There, the man who once swore to love her would try to convince a judge that she was unstable, exaggerated, incapable. Minutes passed slowly. Marina observed each person who entered. Some were lawyers who greeted Clara with discreet nods. Others were curious onlookers, people who attended public hearings as if watching a show. There were also local journalists attracted by the repercussion the case had gained in recent weeks. After all, it wasn't every day that a well-known city businessman found himself involved in a scandal of betrayal and abandonment of his pregnant wife. Marina tried not to think about it. She tried not to care about the judgmental glances, the low whispers, the feeling of being observed as if she were a museum exhibit. But it was difficult. Very difficult. It was then that she heard it, the sound of high heels echoing down the corridor. A rhythmic, measured, deliberate sound. Marina felt her stomach tighten. She knew who it was even before she saw her. She recognized that walk, that way of asserting herself in the environment, that need to be noticed. Jessica Thorne entered the room as if stepping onto a stage. She wore a tight red dress, stiletto heels, and perfectly brushed blonde hair falling over her shoulders. Her lips were painted a vibrant red that matched her dress. She carried a designer handbag and displayed a confident, almost arrogant smile. Her eyes swept the room until they found Marina, and when they did, her smile widened. She walked deliberately to where Marina was sitting. There was no need to pass by there, but Jessica made a point of it. She stopped beside the bench, looked at Marina's belly and let out a theatrical sigh. "My, it's hot today, isn't it?" Jessica said, fanning herself with her hand. "I can only imagine how difficult it must be for you being pregnant like this. You must be exhausted." Marina did not reply. She kept her eyes fixed forward, her hands still on her belly. Ms. Clara Davies, beside her, cast a severe look at Jessica, but also said nothing. She knew any reaction would be exactly what Jessica wanted. "Is it true that pregnant women get very emotional?" Jessica continued, feigning innocence. "I've heard that everything turns into a drama, a cry here, a meltdown there. It must be difficult to control one's emotions, I imagine." Some people in the room began to pay attention. The low murmurs ceased. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Marina took a deep breath, feeling tears welling in her eyes, but she did not allow them to fall. She would not give Jessica that satisfaction. Jessica leaned in slightly, moving closer. "You know, Marina, I just wanted you to know that there are no hard feelings on my part. What happened between you and Robert was natural. People drift apart when they no longer have a connection. It's no one's fault." Marina closed her eyes for a moment. She felt anger rising hot and suffocating, but she kept it trapped inside her. It wasn't the time. Not there. "By the way," Jessica raised her left hand, displaying a diamond ring that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. "Robert gave me this yesterday. Beautiful, isn't it? He said he wanted me to feel special. And I do. Very special." Ms. Clara Davies touched Marina's arm, a gesture of silent support. Marina opened her eyes and looked at Jessica for the first time. Her eyes were teary, but her expression was not one of defeat. It was something deeper, something Jessica couldn't quite decipher. "You'll be fine," Jessica said, still smiling. "I know it seems difficult now, but in time you'll understand, and you'll move on. Everyone does." She then walked away, moving to the other side of the room, where she sat with her usual rehearsed pose. She crossed her legs, adjusted her hair, and waited. She waited for Robert's arrival. She waited for the hearing. She waited for the moment she could witness the definitive disintegration of the woman who once occupied the place that was now hers. Marina remained motionless. Her hands trembled slightly on her belly. She felt the baby stir, as if sensing its mother's tension. She whispered softly, just to herself and her child, words of comfort that tried to calm them both. More people entered the room. The buzz increased. Everyone knew this would not be an ordinary hearing. Everyone awaited the spectacle, but Marina did not want to be a spectacle. She just wanted justice. She just wanted someone, finally, to see the truth behind the masks. And then he arrived. Robert Miller entered through the door with the confident posture of someone accustomed to being in control. Tall, broad-shouldered, with neatly cut greying hair and an impeccable grey suit. At 45, he owned one of Brighton's largest construction companies. He had prestige, money, influence, and he used all of it as weapons. He greeted some acquaintances with nods and cordial smiles. He did not look at Marina. He passed her as if she didn't exist, as if that pregnant woman sitting on the bench wasn't the same one with whom he had shared 15 years of his life. He walked directly to where Jessica was, sat beside her, and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. The gesture was deliberate, public, a statement. Marina looked away. She couldn't bear to see. She couldn't bear to feel the stab that it represented. Ms. Clara Davies opened the folder she was carrying, beginning to review documents, preparing for what was to come. She knew the battle would be tough. She knew Robert would spare no effort to emerge victorious, but she also knew she held something he was unaware of, something that could completely change the course of that hearing. Only a few minutes remained until the start. The room was almost full. The atmosphere was dense, charged with expectation and tension. Marina closed her eyes once more and offered a silent prayer. She asked for strength. She asked for courage. She asked for the truth to finally come to light. Because there, on that cloudy morning in Brighton, not just a divorce would be decided. There it would be decided if a woman would have the right to rebuild her life away from the one who destroyed it. There it would be decided if a baby would grow up in an environment of peace or constant manipulation. There it would be decided if justice truly existed, or if it was just another beautiful word without real meaning. The sudden silence that filled the room was broken by the sound of the side door opening. Everyone instinctively rose. Judge Henry Thompson entered the chamber with firm steps and a solemn posture. He was a man in his 60s with grey hair combed back, discreet framed glasses, and an expression that blended seriousness and compassion. 28 years in the judiciary had taught him to read people, to perceive lies disguised as truths, to identify manipulations hidden beneath well-crafted speeches. He walked to the central table, settled into his chair, and adjusted his glasses, as he quickly surveyed the room. His eyes scanned the faces present. He noticed the tension in the air, the strained expressions, the poorly disguised discomfort of some. He especially noticed the pregnant woman sitting in the front rows, with her protective hands on her belly and red eyes of someone struggling to hold back tears. He also noticed the other woman, in red, with a smile too confident for someone in a courtroom. "Good morning, everyone," said the judge, his grave voice echoing through the room. "We are here for the divorce hearing of case number 3416-2024. Petitioner, Robert Henry Miller. Respondent, Marina Santos Miller. I request that everyone remain silent during the proceedings. Any inappropriate demonstration will result in the immediate removal of the person from the chamber. This is a place of justice, not a spectacle." The message was clear and direct. Some of the curious onlookers shifted in their seats, embarrassed. Jessica maintained her smile, but something in her gaze wavered for a fraction of a second. "May the attorneys present themselves," Judge Thompson continued. From Robert's side, a man in a navy blue suit, impeccable tie, and a leather briefcase in his hands stood up. "Mr. Arthur Maxwell, representing the petitioner, Robert Henry Miller, Your Honor." "Ms. Clara Davies, representing the respondent, Marina Santos Miller," said Marina's lawyer, rising briefly before sitting down again. The judge nodded, making notes on his pad. "Very well, Mr. Maxwell, you may begin." Robert's lawyer stood up with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed every word. He opened his folder, removed some documents, and began. "Your Honor, my client seeks in this action a consensual divorce, with equitable division of assets acquired during the marriage and regulation of visits to the unborn child. I would like to emphasize that Mr. Robert Miller has always been a helpful husband and a dedicated future father. However, the marital relationship became unsustainable due to irreconcilable differences. My client is willing to collaborate financially with all the child's needs and wishes to maintain a healthy and present relationship in the minor's life." Marina felt anger boiling within her. Irreconcilable differences. As if the reason for the separation was something abstract, something without name or face. As if there wasn't a woman in red sitting there displaying a ring as a trophy of conquest. Ms. Clara Davies stood up. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I must contest the narrative presented by the petitioner's defense. This is not a case of consensual divorce. Ms. Marina does not agree with the terms proposed by Mr. Robert, especially concerning custody and visitation. We have evidence that the environment offered by the petitioner is not suitable for the child's emotional well-being." Mr. Arthur Maxwell discreetly rolled his eyes. "Your Honor, the respondent's defense is trying to paint my client as a villain, when in reality he is merely a man who decided to move on after the end of a relationship that no longer worked." There's nothing wrong with that. "There's nothing wrong with abandoning a pregnant wife," Clara retorted, her voice firm and controlled. "There's nothing wrong with exposing this woman to humiliating and degrading situations." "Objection, Your Honor!" Mr. Arthur Maxwell raised his voice. "The respondent's defense is trying to appeal to emotion without presenting concrete facts." "Concrete facts are exactly what we have," Clara replied, opening her folder and pulling out a thick envelope. "And we intend to present them at the appropriate time." The judge raised his hand, asking for silence. "Order, please. Let's maintain civility. Mr. Maxwell, continue your presentation." The lawyer nodded. "As I was saying, Your Honor, my client recognizes his responsibilities. He is aware that the end of the marriage occurred at a delicate time, but this does not make him an absent or irresponsible father. In fact, I would like to call Mr. Robert himself to give his testimony." Robert stood up and walked to the space reserved for witnesses. He took the customary oath and sat down, adjusting his suit with calculated movements. His face displayed a serious, almost contrite expression, as if bearing the weight of a difficult decision. "Mr. Robert, Mr. Arthur Maxwell," began, "could you explain to the judge what led to the termination of the marriage?" Robert sighed as if it were a painful question. "It was difficult, counsel. Very difficult. Marina and I had been together for 15 years. We built a life, a history. But in recent months I realized something had changed. We no longer talked. She was always irritable, always dissatisfied. I really tried to keep the marriage, but it reached a point where I realized it was harming me to continue in a relationship where there was no longer any love." Marina clenched her fists. Every word was a carefully crafted lie. Every sentence was a distortion of reality. "And when did you find out about the pregnancy?" the lawyer asked. "I was happy, of course," Robert replied promptly. "I always wanted to be a father. But I also became worried. Marina was emotionally unstable. Anything was a cause for argument. She interpreted everything in an exaggerated way. I began to fear for her well-being and the baby's." "Unstable?" Clara stood up. "Your Honor, may I question the witness?" "You may," the judge agreed. Clara walked up to Robert, her eyes fixed on his. "Mr. Robert, you claim your wife was emotionally unstable. At what exact moment did you begin to think this?" "As I said, in the last months of the marriage." "Interesting." Clara flipped through some papers. "Because according to Ms. Marina's medical records, she has never been diagnosed with any type of emotional instability. In fact, her obstetrician attests that she is psychologically healthy and fit to care for a child." "I didn't say she was diagnosed," Robert quickly corrected. "I said she was acting unstable. It's different." "I see. And how did this instability manifest itself?" Robert hesitated for a fraction of a second. "She cried a lot. She became paranoid. She thought I was hiding things from her." "And were you?" Clara asked, her voice calm but penetrating. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'll rephrase." Clara returned to her table and picked up another document. "Mr. Robert, at any point during the last 6 months of your marriage, did you maintain an extramarital relationship?" The entire room held its breath. Jessica uncrossed her legs and leaned slightly forward. Robert maintained a controlled expression, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. "Marina and I were already emotionally separated," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "What happened after that shouldn't be considered betrayal." "After?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Could you specify that timeline?" Mr. Arthur Maxwell stood up. "Your Honor, I see no relevance in this line of questioning. The divorce is already a fact. What matters now is the regulation of custody and obligations." "The relevance," Clara replied before the judge could speak, "lies in the petitioner's character and his ability to provide a healthy environment for the child. If he was capable of betraying his wife's trust, if he was capable of manipulating situations and narratives, that needs to be considered." The judge reflected for a moment. "Proceed, Ms. Clara Davies, but be objective." "Yes, Your Honor." She turned her attention back to Robert. "Mr. Robert, did you meet Ms. Jessica Thorne before or after communicating your desire to separate to your wife?" Robert opened his mouth, closed it, and then replied, "Before. But we were just friends." "Just friends," Clara repeated, a tone of incredulity in her voice. "Friends who now live together. Friends who exchange commitment rings. Friends who, according to witnesses, were seen in romantic situations while you were still married." Robert's mask of control began to crack. His jaw tightened. And Marina, for the first time since she had entered that room, felt a spark of hope ignite within her. The atmosphere in the room changed completely. What was once just another divorce hearing now transformed into something greater. People in the benches leaned forward, attentive to every word. Journalists took frantic notes, and Marina, who until then had remained quiet and invisible, began to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, someone was finally willing to listen to the truth. Ms. Clara Davies returned to her table and pulled a set of stapled sheets from her folder. They were printouts of conversations, messages exchanged via a mobile phone application. She held them up for the judge to see. "Your Honor, I would like to present as material evidence the conversations between Mr. Robert and Ms. Jessica Thorne, dated from March to July of this year. In these messages, it is evident that the relationship between the two began long before the couple's official separation." "Objection!" Mr. Arthur Maxwell stood up abruptly. "How were these messages obtained? If illicitly, they cannot be accepted as evidence." "They were obtained from Ms. Marina's own phone," Clara explained calmly. "Mr. Robert, during the marriage, used her tablet to access his messages when his phone was out of battery. The conversations remained synchronized on the device. There was no invasion of privacy, merely access to information that was available on a device belonging to my client." The judge extended his hand. "Bring them for analysis." Clara handed the documents to the bailiff, who took them to Judge Thompson's table. The magistrate began to read, his eyes scanning the lines with increasing attention. As he read, his expression grew more severe. He turned the pages slowly, absorbing every detail. Robert was visibly uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, adjusted his tie, crossed and uncrossed his arms. Jessica, beside him on the bench, had lost her confident smile. Her eyes now showed concern. After a few minutes of reading, the judge looked up and gazed at Robert. "Mr. Robert, in these messages dated April, 2 months before you officially communicated your desire to separate from your wife, there is a conversation in which you tell Ms. Jessica, and I quote, 'I need to get out of this carefully. She can't suspect anything before the right time. When I tell her about the baby, it will be harder for her to react.' Do you confirm that you wrote this?" The silence that followed was deafening. Robert opened his mouth, but no sound came out immediately. Finally, he replied, his voice a little weaker than before. "I was confused at that time. I didn't know how to deal with the situation." "Confused," the judge repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You do not appear confused in these messages, Mr. Robert. You appear quite determined. There is even a conversation where you and Ms. Jessica discuss details about the child's custody even before the baby is born. This deeply concerns me." Ms. Clara Davies seized the moment. "Your Honor, I would like to call Ms. Jessica Thorne to testify." The judge nodded. "Ms. Jessica, please approach to give your testimony." Jessica hesitated for a moment, but there was no choice. She stood up, smoothed her red dress, and walked to the witness stand. She took the oath and sat down, trying to regain the composure she had shown upon entering the room. Ms. Clara Davies wasted no time. "Ms. Jessica, under what circumstances did you meet Mr. Robert?" "We've been friends for a few years," Jessica replied, her voice firm but not as confident as before. "I met him at a business event." "And when did this friendship turn romantic?" Jessica tossed her hair back, a seemingly automatic gesture, an attempt to maintain her facade of control. "After he and Marina decided to separate, Robert sought me out because he was emotionally distraught. I merely offered support." "Support?" Clara echoed. "What kind of support exactly?" "Conversation, companionship. He was going through a difficult time." Clara picked up another document. "In messages from May, you wrote to Mr. Robert, 'When you finally get rid of her, we'll be able to live as we've always wanted.' Can you explain what you meant by get rid of her?" Jessica paled slightly. "I meant when the divorce was finalized. Nothing more than that." "Only that," Clara continued, "because in another message dated June, you suggest to Mr. Robert that he should question Ms. Marina's mental capacity to care for the baby. Why would a friend, offering only emotional support, involve herself in such suggestions?" "I was worried about him," Jessica retorted, a defensive note in her voice. "Marina was driving him crazy with her accusations. She saw betrayal where there was none. It was paranoia." Marina felt the tears return, but this time they were not of pain. They were of indignation. She had been called paranoid for months. Robert had convinced her that she was imagining things, that the signs she saw were a result of her uncontrolled hormones. And now there before everyone was the proof that she had never been imagining anything. "Paranoia," Clara said, her voice cutting. "It's interesting that you use that word, because from the evidence presented here, Miss Marina had every reason to be suspicious, don't you think?" Jessica did not respond immediately. Her eyes sought Robert's as if seeking guidance. He looked away. "Ms. Jessica," the judge intervened, "I would like you to answer the attorney's question." "I don't have to explain my feelings," Jessica said, her voice regaining a tone of arrogance. "Robert chose to be with me, that should say everything." "In fact," Ms. Clara Davies retorted, "what that says is that Mr. Robert made a decision while he was still married, and used subterfuge to hide that decision from his pregnant wife. That is not just unethical, it is cruel." "Objection," Mr. Arthur Maxwell practically shouted. "The attorney is making moral judgments, not legal ones." "Sustained," said the judge. "Ms. Clara Davies, keep your focus on the facts." "Yes, Your Honor." She turned her attention back to Jessica. Ms. Jessica, were you present at any time when Miss Marina was humiliated or disrespected? Jessica frowned. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me refresh your memory. Clara picked up another sheet of paper. Witnesses state that last Saturday, when Miss Marina went to retrieve some of her belongings from the house where she resided with Mr. Robert, you were present and made derogatory comments about her physical appearance and emotional state. Is this true? I was in my home, Jessica replied, raising her chin. I have the right to say what I think. Your home? Marina couldn't contain herself. The word came out as a painful whisper, but loud enough to be heard by many in the room. That was her home. The home she had helped furnish, decorate, turn into a sanctuary. And now Jessica called it hers. The judge turned his attention back to Marina. He saw the pain etched on her face. He saw her hands trembling over her belly. He saw a woman being torn apart and trying to remain whole for the child she carried. Ms. Jessica, the judge said, his voice now firmer, I want to make something very clear. This courtroom is not a stage for displays of superiority or humiliation. If you made offensive comments to Ms. Marina, this will be taken into consideration in my decision. The unborn child deserves to grow up in an environment of respect, not hostility. Jessica opened her mouth to reply, but the judge's severe gaze made her reconsider. She fell silent. You may return to your seat, Judge Thompson said. Jessica stood up and returned to the bench beside Robert, but the triumphant air she had displayed upon entering the room had completely vanished. Now there was fear, and Marina, for the first time in months, felt that she was not alone in that struggle. Ms. Clara Davies turned to where Marina was sitting. Their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. It was time, the moment Marina had both feared and longed for, the chance to finally speak, to put into words everything she had kept inside for months. Your Honor, Clara said, I would like to call Ms. Marina Santos Miller to give her testimony. Marina took a deep breath. She felt the baby stir inside her, as if somehow it knew this was a decisive moment. She stood up slowly, leaning slightly on the backrest of the bench. She walked to the designated spot, each step an affirmation that she was there, alive, resisting. She took the oath in a soft but clear voice. She sat down, adjusted her blouse over her belly, and waited. The judge observed her attentively. There was compassion in his eyes, but also a search for truth. Miss Marina, Miss Clara Davies began gently. I know this is a difficult moment, but I need you to tell in your own words what you have been experiencing in recent months. Marina looked at her own hands. They were trembling. She intertwined them, trying to find firmness in them. Then she looked up at the room filled with people. She saw Robert, who averted his gaze. She saw Jessica, who stared at her with poorly disguised contempt. She saw the curious onlookers, the journalists, the strangers, and she decided that she no longer cared what they would think of her. I tried, she began, and her voice was firmer than she expected. For months I tried to save my marriage. Even when I started to realize something was wrong, even when the evidence was right in front of me, I tried to believe I was imagining things, because that's what Robert told me, that I was paranoid, that I was exaggerating, that my hormones were making me crazy. She paused, feeling tears well up, but she didn't hold them back. She let them fall. When I found out I was pregnant, she continued, I thought it would be a new beginning for us. Robert always said he wanted children, so I told him with so much hope, with so much joy, and he smiled, hugged me, said he was happy. But that very night, I saw him sending messages to someone. When I asked who it was, he said it was work. When I insisted, he got angry. He said I was being controlling, suspicious. Marina wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. I started noticing other signs. He would come home late. He would divert calls when I was nearby. He changed the passwords for his phone and computer. When I questioned him, he accused me of not trusting him. He said a real wife wouldn't spy on her husband. He made me feel guilty for having legitimate doubts. The room was in absolute silence. Every word Marina spoke echoed with a weight that transcended the legal. It was the story of so many women who had been silenced, invalidated, made to feel that their perception of reality didn't matter. He started controlling the money, she revealed, and this part was especially painful. We had a joint account, but he changed that. He said that since I was pregnant and no longer working, it would be more organized if he managed the finances. Every time I needed to buy something, I had to ask. I had to justify it. And if he thought it wasn't necessary, he simply said no. Robert shifted uncomfortably on the bench. Mr. Arthur Maxwell scribbled furiously on his notepad. My friends started drifting away, Marina continued, and only later did I understand why. Robert told them I was emotionally unstable because of the pregnancy, that I said nonsensical things, that it was better to give me space. He isolated me and made it seem like it was for my own good. She looked directly at Robert now. When I finally found out about Jessica, when I had concrete proof, I confronted you. And do you know what you said? That I was having a breakdown. That pregnant women get emotional and see things that don't exist. You made me believe I was crazy, that the problem was me, not you. Marina, Robert began to speak, but the judge raised his hand, silencing him. You will have your chance to respond, Mr. Robert. Now is Ms. Marina's time to speak. Marina nodded in thanks to the judge. When he finally admitted he wanted a divorce, it was 3 days before an important medical appointment. The doctor had detected a minor complication in the pregnancy and asked me to avoid stress. Robert knew this, but he still chose that moment to say he was leaving. He said he no longer loved me, that he had found someone better, someone who truly made him happy. Tears fell freely now, but Marina didn't stop. He left home that day. He left me alone, pregnant, scared. And the next day, when I went to my appointment, my blood pressure was extremely high. I had to be medicated. The doctor said that if it continued like that, it could harm the baby. I called Robert, begged him to talk calmly, to think about our child. He hung up on me. Marina ran her hand over her belly, a protective gesture. In the following weeks, I tried to maintain my dignity. I tried to process everything alone, but Jessica wouldn't let me. She would appear in places she knew I would be. She posted photos with Robert on social media, always with provocative captions. She commented on how good it was to have finally found a man who valued her. It was as if taking my husband wasn't enough. She needed to destroy me completely. Ms. Clara Davies approached gently. Marina, what did you feel when you knew you would have to face Robert in this hearing? Fear, Marina replied without hesitation. A lot of fear, because I know how persuasive he is. I know how he manages to make people believe him. He built a narrative where I am the villain, the unbalanced woman who doesn't accept the end of the marriage. And I feared that even here, even before a judge, that narrative would prevail. And what do you expect from this hearing? Clara asked. Marina looked at the judge. I expect justice. I don't want revenge. I don't want to harm Robert. I just want my child to grow up in a safe environment, away from manipulations and psychological games. I want him to have the chance to know his father, but I don't want him to be used as a bargaining chip or as a way to continue controlling me. She paused and then said something that surprised everyone. And I want other women who are going through the same thing to know that they are not crazy, that when they feel something is wrong, it probably is, that their emotions are valid, that they deserve respect. The judge wrote rapidly. Ms. Clara Davies smiled discreetly, proud, and Marina, exhausted but relieved, felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Thank you, Ms. Marina, said the judge. Mr. Maxwell, would you like to ask the witness any questions? Robert's lawyer stood up. Ms. Marina, don't you think you might in fact be exaggerating some events due to your current emotional state? Before Marina could respond, Ms. Clara Davies intervened. Objection, Your Honor. The question is offensive and repeats exactly the pattern of emotional invalidation that my client described. Sustained, said the judge, looking severely at Mr. Arthur Maxwell. Rephrase your question or move to the next. Mr. Arthur Maxwell hesitated, realizing that any attempt to disqualify Marina now would be counterproductive. No further questions, Your Honor. Marina returned to her seat, and for the first time since entering that room she felt strong. Still fragile, still hurt, but strong. The judge leafed through a few more documents. Then he looked up and said something that made everyone's hearts race. "Before proceeding, I must inform you that I received an additional report this morning that I deem relevant to this case. A report that considerably changes my understanding of the situation." The entire room held its breath. Robert turned pale. Jessica grabbed his arm, and Marina, not knowing exactly what was to come, felt a mixture of hope and terror. The judge opened a sealed envelope on his desk and began to read. The silence in the room was so dense that one could hear the sound of the judge turning the pages of paper. Judge Henry Thompson read with an increasingly grave expression, his lips compressed into a thin line. His eyes, behind his glasses, showed a mixture of indignation and sadness. He had seen a lot in almost 3 decades of magistracy, but some situations still managed to shock him. Finally he looked up. He swept the room with his eyes, resting them briefly on each person present. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone straighten up. "This report," he began, holding up the document, "was prepared by a private investigation agency hired by Ms. Marina's family. Normally, I would be skeptical of private investigations, as they often lack rigor. However, this report was meticulously documented and corroborated by material evidence that I personally verified." Robert tried to maintain his composure, but his hands squeezed the arms of the chair so hard that his knuckles were white. Jessica had completely lost color in her face. "According to this report," the judge continued, "Mr. Robert Miller not only initiated an extramarital relationship while his wife was pregnant, but also instructed employees of his company to provide false alibis if questioned about his whereabouts on certain dates. 3 employees confirmed in recorded testimonies that they were instructed to lie." A murmur ran through the room. Mr. Arthur Maxwell immediately stood up. "Your Honor, I must question the legality and admissibility of these testimonies. My client was not informed about this investigation." "There is nothing illegal about it, Mr. Maxwell," the judge replied dryly. "The employees gave their testimonies voluntarily. No one was coerced. And as for Mr. Robert not being informed, he also didn't inform his wife about many things, did he?" The lawyer sat down, clearly without an adequate response. The judge returned to the report. "But what concerns me most is not just the lies about the relationship. What deeply concerns me are the recorded conversations between Mr. Robert and Ms. Jessica Thorne about specific strategies to emotionally destabilize Ms. Marina." Marina felt her heart race. She hadn't known her mother had hired investigators. Mrs. Lucy Miller, always so protective, always so determined to defend her daughter. Marina felt a wave of gratitude flood her chest. "I have here," the judge picked up a small device, "audio recordings legally obtained from conversations that occurred in public spaces. I will play one of them." He connected the device to a loudspeaker. The sound filled the room. It was Robert's voice, unmistakable. "We need to make her seem unstable. If she has a public meltdown, even better. We have to document everything. It will help with the custody process." And then Jessica's voice, equally clear. "I can provoke her. I know exactly what to say to get under her skin. Pregnant women are emotional. Anything makes them cry. If she has a breakdown in front of witnesses, we can use that." "Exactly," Robert's voice agreed. "And when the baby is born, we'll ask for shared custody. She'll need me financially. I can use that to maintain control. If she doesn't cooperate, we cut the alimony. We say the money is for the child, not for her to fund her life." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Marina had tears streaming down her face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were of validation. Everything she had felt, everything she had suspected, was there, exposed, confirmed. Robert was livid. He stood up abruptly. "This is a trap. These recordings were taken out of context." "Sit down, Mr. Robert," the judge ordered, his voice thundering through the room. "Or you will leave here escorted. Choose." Robert hesitated, but Judge Thompson's unwavering gaze made him reconsider. He sat down, but was visibly trembling with rage and fear. "There is more," the judge continued, relentless. conversations in which you discuss with Ms. Jessica how you could manipulate the public narrative to make Ms. Marina appear to be a vindictive and bitter wife. Messages in which Ms. Jessica suggests spreading rumors about Ms. Marina's mental health in social circles. And most seriously of all, discussions about how they could use the child as a tool for emotional and financial control. The judge removed his glasses and cleaned the lenses, a gesture that seemed more an attempt to process the disappointment he felt for human nature than a real need. He put his glasses back on and gazed at Robert and Jessica with severity. "You two," he said, his voice low but laden with authority, "systematically plan to destroy the mental health of a pregnant woman, not out of necessity, not in defense, but for convenience, to facilitate your personal objectives." Jessica tried to speak. "Your Honor, I never meant to harm anyone, You just what?" The judge interrupted her. "Just helped devise strategies to traumatize a pregnant woman. Just provoked a woman in a vulnerable situation. Just displayed symbols of your illicit relationship as if they were trophies?" Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears began to fall, but they were tears of someone caught, not of someone repentant. The judge turned his attention back to Robert. "And you, Mr. Robert, a respected businessman, a member of charitable institutions, known in society as a man of integrity. But here in this evidence I see a calculating manipulator. I see someone who used his position of power to control and subjugate the woman with whom he shared 15 years of his life." Robert tried to regain some dignity. "Your Honor, my personal life was difficult. The marriage was bad. I just wanted to move on." "Moving on," the judge repeated, "does not include destroying those left behind. You had every right to seek a divorce, every right to rebuild your life, but you did not have the right to do so at the expense of the emotional and physical health of your child's mother. You did not have the right to orchestrate a campaign of defamation and psychological manipulation." Marina was listening to everything as if in a dream where, for the first time, someone saw the truth, someone understood, someone believed her. Ms. Clara Davies placed a hand on Marina's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and support. Marina looked at her with immense gratitude. The judge organized the papers on his desk. "I will call for a 30-minute recess. When we return, I will give my decision on temporary custody and the necessary protective measures. Mr. Maxwell, I suggest you speak with your client about the seriousness of the situation. Ms. Clara Davies, you and your client may wait in the reserved room." He struck the gavel, temporarily adjourning the hearing. People began to stand, low conversations filling the space. Marina stood up, supported by Ms. Clara Davies. Her legs were weak, her body exhausted, but her soul felt lighter than it had in months. She looked back one last time. She saw Robert with his head in his hands. She saw Jessica wiping away tears of anger and humiliation. She saw the castle of lies they had built crumbling around them. And for the first time, Marina allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. 3 months had passed since that morning at the Lafayette courthouse. October brought with it the British autumn, and with it, the renewal Marina so desperately needed. The apartment where she now lived, a smaller but cozy space in the Kensington district, was bathed in the soft afternoon light. Through the window, she could see the trees blooming in the streets, bringing vibrant colors to contrast with the gray of the asphalt. In the crib beside the armchair where Marina sat, Michael slept. 3 weeks old, with dark eyes like hers, tiny fists clenched, even in sleep. He had arrived in the world on a peaceful September morning, healthy and strong, proving that despite all the emotional turbulence of the pregnancy, a mother's love had been enough to protect him. Marina watched her son sleep, and still marveled at the perfection of that tiny being. Every breath, every movement, every sound he made was a miracle, and he was all hers to protect, to love, to guide. Life after the hearing had not been easy. The first few days were full of adjustments. Mrs. Lucy Miller had temporarily moved into the apartment, helping her daughter with preparations for the baby's arrival. Together they transformed the small second bedroom into a cozy nursery. Walls painted light blue, colourful mobiles hanging from the ceiling, shelves with children's books that Marina already began to read to Michael every night. Robert strictly complied with the judicial determinations. The child support was deposited on the correct day, without delays. He attended therapy sessions, and according to the reports arriving at the courthouse, he was genuinely trying to understand his mistakes. He had not yet had contact with Michael. Supervised visits would only begin when the baby completed 2 months, as per medical advice. Marina didn't know how she felt about it. There were days when she felt anger, days when she felt pity, and days when she simply felt nothing but indifference. From Jessica, Marina had heard nothing more. She learned through mutual acquaintances that Jessica had left Brighton. Some said she had gone to London, others that she had returned to her hometown in the countryside. Marina did not seek confirmation. It no longer mattered. The protective order remained in effect, and if Jessica was minimally sensible, she would keep her distance. What surprised Marina most in recent months was the support network that formed around her. Women who had read about her case in the newspapers sought her out. They shared their own stories of manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse. Marina realized she was not alone. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands of women who were experiencing or had experienced similar situations, and many of them were still trapped in that cycle, unable to escape, believing they deserved the treatment they received. That's how the idea was born. Marina created an online support group, moderated by her and 2 volunteer psychologists. The group grew rapidly. Women shared their pains, their doubts, their small victories. Marina contributed with her own experience, showing that it was possible to leave, that it was possible to rebuild, that it was possible to be happy again. "You are making a difference," Ms. Clara Davies had told her during a recent visit. The lawyer had become more than a legal representative. She had become a friend. "Every woman you help find her voice is a victory against everything they tried to do to you." Marina smiled, remembering those words. She had discovered a purpose. Her pain would not be in vain. It would be transformed into strength, into hope for others. Michael stirred in the crib, making a small sound. Marina got up and went to him, gently stroking his fine hair. He calmed down immediately, returning to deep sleep. She whispered softly, as she did every night. "You will grow up knowing you are loved unconditionally. You will grow up seeing that women are strong, that they deserve respect, that they should not accept less than they deserve. And if one day you become a man, you will treat people with the dignity everyone deserves, because I will teach you this, day after day, until it is rooted in who you are." A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Mrs. Lucy Miller, carrying a tray with tea and biscuits. "How's my grandson?" the older woman asked, placing the tray on the coffee table and walking over to the crib. "Sleeping like an angel," Marina replied with a smile. "Just like you when you were a baby," Mrs. Lucy Miller said tenderly. "Always so calm, so serene." She took her daughter's hand. "I am very proud of you, Marina, of what you've become, of how you faced all of this." "I wouldn't have made it without you, Mom," Marina replied, squeezing her hand back. "You would have," Mrs. Lucy Miller affirmed with conviction, "because the strength was always within you. I merely helped you find it." They sat together on the sofa, sipping tea while discussing future plans. Marina was considering returning to work in a few months. She had been a literature teacher before marrying Robert, and she missed the classroom, the contact with students, the possibility of inspiring young minds. "And Robert," Mrs. Lucy Miller asked cautiously, "have you thought about what it will be like when the visits begin?" Marina sighed. "I think about it every day, I'm afraid I won't lie. Afraid that he might try to manipulate Michael as he tried to manipulate me. But the judge was wise to require supervised visits, and I will be vigilant, always." "Michael has you as a mother," Mrs. Lucy Miller said. "That's more than enough to protect him." The following weeks brought a routine Marina learned to embrace. Waking up to Michael's cries in the middle of the night, feeding him, calming him, watching him fall asleep again. The days were filled with care, with discoveries, with small joys. Michael's first smile, though likely involuntary, filled Marina's heart with a happiness she didn't know was possible to feel. And on a sunny October afternoon, As Marina was in the park near home, walking with Michael in his stroller, something unexpected happened. She saw Robert. He was sitting on a bench, clearly waiting. When their eyes met, Marina felt the impulse to turn and leave. But something made her stop. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps the need to definitively close that chapter. Robert stood up and walked slowly towards her. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Marina," he said, his voice low, "may I speak with you? Just for a minute." Marina hesitated but nodded affirmatively. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your time," Robert began, and there was something different about him. The arrogance had vanished. "But I needed to say that I am deeply sorry for what I did, for what I failed to do, for all the ways I hurt you." Marina said nothing. She just waited. "Therapy has been difficult," he continued, "because I'm having to face things about myself that I always avoided. I'm having to admit that I was cruel, manipulative, abusive. Those words are hard to say, but they are true." "Why are you telling me this?" Marina asked, her voice neutral. "Because you deserve to hear it, and because when I finally get the chance to meet my son, I want to be the best version of myself, not the version that existed 3 months ago. I don't know if you will ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I am trying to change." Marina looked at him for a long moment. She saw a broken man trying to rebuild himself. She felt no pleasure in it, but she also felt no pity. "Forgiveness is something you will have to earn, Robert," she said finally. "Not from me, from yourself, and from Michael, when he is old enough to understand. All I can say is that I sincerely hope you manage to be the father he deserves." Robert nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you. For everything. For having strength when I only brought weakness." He then walked away, strolling back through the park. Marina watched until he disappeared among the trees. Then she looked at Michael, who slept peacefully in his stroller, oblivious to the encounter that had just taken place. "Let's go home, my love," she whispered. As she walked back to the apartment, Marina reflected on everything that had happened, on the pain, on the struggle, on the victory, on how she had discovered within herself a strength she didn't know she possessed, on how one of the worst moments of her life had transformed into one of the most transformative. And she realized something important. She was no longer the same Marina who had entered that courthouse months ago. She was stronger, more aware, more whole. She had lost a marriage, but she had gained herself, and that she knew was far more valuable. Dear listeners, we hope Marina's story has touched your hearts. How many of us have felt silenced, invalidated, made to feel that our pain wasn't real? Marina's journey shows us that there is strength even when we feel most fragile, that there is justice even when all seems lost, and that it is always, always worth fighting for our dignity and for the safety of those we love. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to become part of our community. Subscribe to our channel to receive more stories of overcoming, of women who transformed their pain into strength and their struggles into victories. Leave a like and, in the comments, share your thoughts. Your story matters too. Your voice also deserves to be heard. And together we are stronger. Until the next story, take care and always remember, you deserve respect, love, and dignity, always.